Ever wish you could just hit like a reset button on life? You know, when things get a little messy, especially with debt.
Yeah, like a financial do-over. I can relate to that.
Exactly. And you know what? It turns out Spain might have something like that. Our listeners have been asking about how different countries handle personal bankruptcy, and wow, Spain is unique.
Oh, how so?
Well, they have this concept, get ready for it. It's called Exoneración del Pasivo Insatisfecho.
Exoneración del Pasivo. Say that again?
Right. It's a mouthful. Basically, it means discharge of unsatisfied liabilities, but don't let the legal jargon scare you. It's all about giving people a second chance, financially speaking.
Okay, now that sounds interesting. A second chance, huh?
Yeah. And we actually found this really informative video from Adara Legal, a Spanish legal advice channel, that explains it all in plain language.
So, what's the catch? There's always a catch, right?
Well, it's not a free pass, that's for sure. It's not about rewarding irresponsible behavior.
Right, because that wouldn't be fair to anyone.
Exactly. This system really emphasizes good faith. It's there to help those who genuinely fell on hard times, not those who are being reckless with their finances.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, someone's in a tough spot, they lose their job, bills are piling up. How would this whole Exoneración del Pasivo thing actually help them?
So imagine it like this. You come to the court with a plan. They call it a payment plan exoneration. You lay out exactly what you can pay back over time.
So it's like a structured settlement.
Yeah, exactly. Usually it's spread out over a few years, maybe 3 to 5. And if the court approves it,
You get your financial fresh start.
you got it. As long as you keep up with those payments, any remaining debt is wiped clean. It's like a huge weight lifted off your shoulders.
Wow, that's actually pretty amazing. But what about those situations where, like, someone has literally nothing left? I mean, they've sold everything, but they're still drowning in debt.
That's where the other option comes in, the liquidation exoneration. It's a bit more final.
Final. As in,
Okay, so let's say you've exhausted every other option, sold off assets, tapped into every resource you have. This is kind of like the last resort. You petition the court to discharge whatever debt is left.
so the system recognizes that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, life can throw some real curveballs your way.
Exactly. And in those cases, it's about offering a chance to rebuild, to start over. So are you saying that in Spain, there are times when the system's just like, hey, we get it, you're off the hook? That's wild. But it can't apply to every single debt out there, right?
That's a great point. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Spain's system is designed to be compassionate, but it's not naive. There's a big emphasis on personal responsibility, especially when it comes to certain types of debts.
Okay, so like what kind of debts are we talking about?
Well, think about it this way. If you've harmed someone, say you cause an accident and there are medical bills,
Right, yeah.
those debts are taken very seriously. Spain wants to make sure people are held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, that makes sense. You shouldn't be able to just wipe away those consequences because you're struggling financially. But what about, like, owing money to the government? Those public debts, student loans, things like that.
Okay, so with public debts, it gets interesting. Spain offers some relief, but it's kind of like a sliding scale.
A sliding scale? How does that work?
Let's say you owe 10,000 euros, for example. The first 5,000, completely forgiven, gone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But for the remaining amount, you get a 50% reduction.
So it's like they're cutting you a break, but also sending a message you're still responsible for part of that debt. It all comes back to that good faith idea, right? They're making sure the system isn't abused.
Exactly. And speaking of making sure things are on the up and up, there are some pretty strict requirements to even qualify for this whole exoneration thing in the first place.
Oh, there are.
Oh, yeah. Big time. You have to prove you actually deserve a second chance. They don't just hand these out to anyone.
All right, so spill it. What do they look at? What do people need to do to prove they're, not trying to pull a fast one?
Well, for starters, they take a good hard look at your financial history, like a background check for your finances.
Oh, so they're looking for any skeletons in the closet, financially speaking.
Exactly. Yeah. Any convictions for financial crimes in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Things like fraud or tax evasion.
Yeah.
That's a huge red flag. You're probably out of luck if that's the case.
So no shady business dealings in your past. Makes sense. What else?
Honesty and transparency are key. The court needs to see you're fully cooperating, not trying to hide assets or anything like that.
So you can't just show up asking for a handout. You got to be willing to lay it all out on the table. But isn't that kind of, a bit of a catch-22? It's like, we'll help you out, but only if you haven't made any of the mistakes that might have led you to needing help in the first place.
I see where you're coming from. It definitely highlights the tightrope this system is trying to walk, offering relief to those who genuinely deserve it while also preventing anyone from taking advantage.
It's a tough balance for sure. So let's say someone does tick all the boxes, they've acted responsibly, they're facing real hardship. What's next? How do they actually apply for this debt discharge? So we've got someone who's been through it, acted responsibly, checks all the boxes for the Spanish fresh start thing. What's the next step? They just, walk into a courtroom and plead their case.
Not exactly. Remember those two paths we talked about? Payment plan and liquidation. Each has its own process. For the payment plan, you got to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
Show them you're serious. How's that work?
They send a formal request to the court, but it has to include a rock-solid plan, a detailed budget, proof of income, clear payment schedule. Not just, I'll pay you back eventually, but the how and when.
No vague promises, just hard numbers. Then what? Judge says okay.
Not so fast. Creditors get a say too.
Wait, the people they OWE money to get a voice in this?
Absolutely. They can challenge the plan. Maybe they think the debtor can pay back more or the timeline isn't fair. It's a negotiation, legally speaking.
So it's not one-sided. Trying to find a solution that works for everyone. What if the court does approve the plan, though?
Then it's up to the debtor to stick to it. If they meet their obligations, they get the Exoneration Definitiva, the official seal of approval on that clean slate.
Makes sense, but the liquidation route. Someone sells everything, but it's still not enough. What then?
Once liquidation's done, they can petition the court to discharge the remaining debt. But the court still checks everything carefully.
Still got to make sure everything's above board.
Exactly. Was the debtor honest? Hiding assets? It comes back to good faith. If the court's satisfied, they can grant the exoneration, giving the debtor that needed relief.
This whole Spanish system is fascinating. Such a different way of looking at debt, at second chances. It's actually pretty refreshing.
It really is. It reminds us that sometimes people just need a hand up, not a judgment. And this system tries to offer that while keeping things fair for everyone.
Makes you think, how would something like this go over in other countries? Something to ponder, for sure. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been eye-opening.